Today we have two very distinguished scholars speaking on a very important topic that is a key concern for GIFT's research mandate as well. The title of the presentation is A Critical Appraisal of Gender Budgeting in Kerala. The presentation is going to be delivered by Dr. Ashraf Pulikamat. Dr. Ashraf Pulikamat is an interdisciplinary researcher. He is currently a faculty at VIT, and he has obtained his PhD, MA, MPhil, and PhD with a focus on gender budgeting from University of Chennai, University of Madras. And in 2017, he was honored with the Japan East Asia Network of Exchange for Students and Youth Fellowship by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Government of Japan, Tokyo. He is a member of various professional bodies, including World Economic Association and Development Studies Association. On behalf of GIFT, we warmly welcome you, Dr. Ashraf.
Yes, sir.
We have a very distinguished chairperson to chair this session. We welcome Dr. Niyati R. Krishna to GIFT community. Dr. Niyati R. Krishna is currently Sir Ratan Tata postdoctoral fellow in London School of Economics. She's also she's basically there for a postdoctoral fellowship. She's an assistant professor at Department of Development Studies, Regional Center for Chandigarh, and her expertise. She's a feminist academician. She has been working on areas related to gender. So we can't have a better person than Dr. Niyati Krishna to chair this session. And we once again welcome you, Dr. Niyati R. Krishna, and thank you for accepting our invitation to chair this session. Now, I hand it over to Dr. Niyati R. Krishna to conduct the proceedings.
Thank you so much, respected Professor K.J. Joseph, Director of GIFT, Dr. Ashraf, the speaker of the day, Dr. Kiran, the coordinator of the seminar, and other faculty members, students, and scholars. Good afternoon. Dr. Ashraf Pulikamat today will be sharing his research findings on gender budgeting. Gender budgeting is a buzzword that we often use while talking about inclusivity, especially of fiscal planning, fiscal inclusivity, but there is a lack of clarity on its definition, scope, and impact. Many times it is simply interpreted as budget allocation to women, while in reality, gender responsive budgeting is a framework that calls for including a gender perspective at all levels of governmental budgetary processes, because the practical and strategic gender needs of men, women, and other genders vary. It is also a tool in understanding the different impacts of spending and revenue decisions on different genders. Most of the studies and discussions on gender budgeting has an ex-ante focus where we forecast predictions, because many times we are unable to map and quantify the outcome and impact of gender budgeting. So my interest in gender budgeting as a researcher working predominantly on women's paid and unpaid care work in the context of India is two-pronged. One, how emerging economies having complex socio-cultural and political implications can address different challenges of gender discrimination with larger informal economic sectors, with larger proportion of women working through gender budgeting. And the second, addressing the double shift of women, that is paid labor and the unpaid care burden, in shaping policies and thus systematically addressing the causes and cost of lower female labor force participation rate in India. Though there is often a decoupling between policy and practice, especially countries like India can be greatly benefited out of a carefully curated implementation focused gender budgeting. So let's listen from the speaker, Dr. Ashraf, in today's lecture. He will be critically analyzing Kerala's gender budgeting over the past 15 years. We will have question answer round and discussion afterwards. Now over to you, Ashraf. Of course, thank you for inviting me to this program.
Thank you. Give me a moment. I hope the screen is visible.
Yes, yes.
Okay. Um, a very good afternoon to one and all present over there, and thank you for such a thoughtful introduction to the session, Neeti ma'am. Uh, I think that is the best to set up the talk for today, and as you must have seen the title and abstract, so that we are actually discussing gender budgeting, or I am planning to discuss uh, this gender budgeting criticism as a policy criticism, not per se in terms of number. I think you yourself may have heard a lot and seen a lot about the number allocations and the game associated with it. That is one criticism in itself. So, uh, prior to my discussion, I wanted to acknowledge that this is a work in progress study. That's a working paper under the C. Menon and T. R. Chandradat Fellowship 2023 that I received from Costford, Thrissur, and it's incomplete. I'm in the process of making it. So as Niti ma'am already indicated that there is a chaos, there is a confusion that what is gender budgeting beyond the buzzword that everyone uses, or it is very much popularized by the media or the scholar community also in the discussions, the gender budgeting, gender inclusion, gender mainstreaming, gender responsive fiscal policies, and so on and so forth. Where it is coming from, how it should have been, and what we have today, and what is its problem, despite having it for a decade or more than a decade for now in different levels in India, including in Kerala. That is my query, and I'm trying to throw some questions towards the policy that we have in Kerala, because I believe that Kerala is a forerunner of most of these sort of social development aspects in the past or in the history. It couldn't do, in my argument, with gender budgeting, the same forerunning strategy. So,
Dr. Ashraf,
going, yeah,
sorry to interrupt you. Can you please put it on full screen mode?
sorry.
No problem. Thank you.
Uh, Going with the definition or the genesis or the idea of gender budgeting is that understanding that the fiscal policies, when we refer here fiscal policies, again, it relates to budgetary policies, not taxes per se. It should ideally, but it isn't. So, understanding that fiscal policies are not neutral towards all the genders when it is dispersed, when it actually being spent by the government. So, understanding the issue that it is not gender neutral and it has to be gender sensitive deliberately is the first understanding or first step or first sort of definition of gender budgeting. So Minister of Women and Child Development, Government of India has itself stated that explicitly in multiple documents, saying that this is what gender budgeting means to, and thereby you are trying to mainstream gender in finances, government finances. And the history, of course, traces back to Australia, uh, in 1984, that they have like mooted the idea and came up with the strategy to put gender in the financial spectrum, etc., etc. And the 1995 World Conference on Women by UN in Beijing has actually literally called for action of gender inclusiveness in finances, and that is where gender budgeting is getting its birth formally or officially, though there are foreigners like Australia. Then there are, since it is in 1990s and we are sitting in 2024, and there are three decades almost that have been completing, there are enormous studies indicating that put in a correct way, gender budgeting can actually produce results in terms of indicators that says that women empowerment or gender empowerment or development scenario in a gender sensitive way is happening. Gender budgeting theoretically or conceptually can be perceived in many aspects. Gender budgeting, as somebody learn it, I mean, I have learned it, of course, from predominantly from economics, then partly from gender studies aspect also, but it is equally public administration, political science, development studies, etc. So it has multiple dimension to understanding the concept of gender budgeting. So one or two immediate thing that we should be thinking about gender budgeting when we discuss is that it is talking about transparency and accountability of government commitments or fiscal commitments towards having a gender equal or gender equitable society. Secondly, it is also aiming towards a bit more of efficiency dimension. That's what Netima mentioned, that if curated in a proper way, we are untapping a lot of potential of the economy, which is extremely populous, like India, for example. And good governance, participatory good governance, right-based, women's right-based structures. There are so many, but I'm predominantly looking at in Kerala's case on transparency and accountability, which is the bare minimum. So as I already mentioned, that the literature in the area is actually huge, really huge, and we have literature starting from gender and economics, feminist economics perspective, criticizing classical economics too. Discussion of development, situating gender in its middle, in its side, overarching, etc. Following gender budgeting literature. So gender budgeting, of course, is a discussion of 90s and early 2000s as a policy. And gender budgeting in India is also extensively studied. There is a reason behind it that before I'm going to the review of literature, if you look at the map by IMF called gender budgeting indicator map given by IMF, that you see India is the predominant, one of the few predominant countries in the world that is extensively executing gender budgeting in their finances as a policy. So naturally, India has gender budgeting policy at the union budget level, state budget level, even at the local budget level in certain states like Kerala. So we are unbeatable that way, and since our mass is so huge and there is extensive literature. So feminist critique against mainstream economics, classical economics, is that everyone knew that it is very much uh, very much having an assumption of gender neutrality, that it calls people are homo economicus, that there is no difference between apparently men and women or Muslim and Hindu or lower caste and upper caste. I mean, it's human is equal to human. This is what classical economics assumption, and feminist critiques on this is plenty, classically speaking or conceptually speaking from the beginning. In the context of development, Esther Bosserer can be considered as the one of the milestone economists who have put women or gender in discussion of development in 1970s in her book called Women's Role in Economic Development, which created radical changes in the discussions in the post Second World War development scenario. Where are women situated in the economic development? That's the world now is looking at. And across time, from 1960s to now, 2015, 2030 Sustainable Development Goal Agenda of UN, everywhere in each decade, there are at least one or two major initiations towards inclusion of gender in the mainstream, especially with regard to finance. 1990s have seen momentum of such attempts, including GDI, Gender Development Index, or GEM, Gender Empowerment Measurement, or GII, which I didn't write, Gender Inequality Index, etc. 1995 conference was again that I have referred already to was the pathbreaker in the line, calling the governments to gender sensitize their finances for that matter. Now, if we move ahead with, I mean, I'm not discussing literature extensively because I think time will not be sufficient for that. So I'm only picking up the highlight actually indicates that the point that I'm concentrating on among all the other points. So if you look at the very quick review of gender budgeting studies that has happened globally, it is already said or iterated that gender differential impacts are a sure shot outcome of budgetary policies, so that we have to address it. It's not neutral, it is established. And as I already told you, gender budgeting also keeps or should keep the concerned government accounted for their commitments towards gender equality or gender equity in that particular society. At least these two. That what is the share that we are disbursing on gender equality in the particular economy vis-a-vis in society, and also agreeing to a fact that gender differential impacts are a reality of the budgets that is coming out each year as benefiting the total society. So from there, if you come to India, India had kind of in my opinion, there were like two layers of taking gender budgeting as a policy in India. The initial one was WCP, Women's Component Plan, which was a sub plan or sub component of the 5-year plan that we had. And from ninth plan from 1997 to 2002, we have adopted WCP, Women Component Plan, in our budgetary policies. Now there are no plans by and large in India, except for a few states like Kerala. And this is one way that we were an early starter in gender sensitizing our fiscal policy, that the plan expenditure were at least partly gender sensitized. There was a proportion of expenses which were allocated for women, but it was a one size fit for all sort of allocation, that at the center level it was thought out to be that 30% of the plan allocation will go for women beneficiaries. In states like Kerala, it was 10%. So WCP easily took its practice because it was so easy to put it in that you had to, I mean, we had a lot of sub plans like tribal sub plan or SC/ST component sub plan, that plan, this plan. So it was so easy for people to understand that, okay, now that there is a separate component for women, we have to put some for women, 10%, 20%, 50%. But the gender budgeting idea, by definition, is different, that it is actually trying to sensitize the whole budgetary allocations in a way that how it incidentally benefit on different genders or incidentally benefit women and men separated. But the idea became very chaotic in India in early 2000s when India adopted gender budgeting in the 10th plan. Partly because we are just starting, and there is no, even today, there is no conclusive argument that this is the structure of gender budgeting that you should follow. It's only like this state is looking at the other state, or this local government is looking at the other local government, and so on and so forth. So over 4 5-year plans, 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th. 12th was like a nominal 5-year plan, I say, because of the political regime change at the center. But Kerala had it extensively continuing even now. This is kind of like a two-sided sword, that one way that we have sensitized our fiscal policy very early in 1990s itself, the other way that it makes the situation problematic, that WCP is never separated from gender budgeting, that is today. So the literature on the gender budgeting concentrating on India is partly also because of that India has taken enormous number of steps towards executing this policy at the union budget level and at the different state budget levels also. So you see, right from 2001, like by constituting a committee committee chaired by Ashok Lahiri, which is later called as Ashok Lahiri Committee, to institute gender budgeting, to propose a structure of gender budgeting, to propose the guidelines of gender budgeting, to introduction of gender budgeting at the union budget level in 2005-06, and then asking different states and other local governments to adopt gender budgeting at their state policies, and adding inputs towards it, like handbook of gender budgeting, or how gender budgeting cells can function in each of these finance departments, or what are the guidelines towards gender audit of the existing policy so that we can have better gender budgeting policy in the next year. So many inputs have already gone. And to be very frank, GBCs were introduced in 2010, and most of the GBCs are died over 5 or 6 years. And if you go to different state governments or union government itself, you see there is no gender budget cell per se. It was there. Now it is with something else. So there were a lot of happenings around gender budgeting, as again, calling back to the buzzword sort of a scenario with regard to gender budgeting in India. So there are plenty of criticisms also against gender budgeting in India. And two of them that I am concentrating on are feminization of welfare through fiscal policies and establishing or reiterating patriarchal approach in the name of gender budgeting. I repeat, feminization of welfare happened by gender budgeting, and reinstating patriarchal approach towards development has happened due to gender budgeting. All the others are also existential, but for our context, let us move ahead to. Similarly, with research graphs, there are plenty. The one that I am addressing is that there are no state-specific serious critical studies or cross-state comparative studies that has happened taking gender budgeting as a policy. As ma'am already mentioned that you may have seen a lot of studies explaining that ex ante ex post volume of budget allocation and the realization hasn't happened. The money went, money came around, or indicator improved or indicator disproved, so on and so forth. Such studies are plenty. And very qualitative studies which explains the merit, demerits, etc. sort of studies are also plenty. But something which is very critical about the policy as a policy is very rare or very hard to find. So that is the niche where I'm criticizing Kerala's policy. Now, as an objective, since I told you that it is kind of a working paper, that the objective is to per se throw some of the criticism that I have on the policy, which can be corrected through a course correction mechanism as a policy which is still ongoing. So drawing insights towards that is the objective of this particular paper. Data is from the gender budget statements that are available from 17 to 24. And I have also made in-person interviews with different stakeholders, right from government stakeholders to some sort of NGO or activist stakeholders as a part of the study, qualitative discussion to know more about the process and like execution of the policy. And the explanation is obviously descriptive. There is nothing like empirical or proving or disproving sort of thing. And I'm not looking at ex and ex post scenario also. And I situate the argument within three theoretical strands. I'm not taking the theories fully. One is Caroline Moser's strategic and practical gender needs that exists in third world, that we have to address gender needs practically and strategically. Strategic is the one that leads to empowerment. I'm also taking a bit of Srilada Vatliwala's argument that the empowerment should be given space or resources first, then only it takes place. There should be a dedicated specific space towards inclusion of gender so that it will take its own momentum to create its agency and then it take up a next step. This is again situated within Kunyaman's, Professor M. Kunyaman's argument that Kerala model of development is problematic in his study in 2018. That it actually tried to keep the downtrodden people excluded in the name of inclusion, maybe in terms of political power or as in terms of economic power. Here, gender budgeting is kind of an economic power that keeps some segment of the society always at the receiving end. I'm not taking the theories fully. So if somebody think that what could be the larger overarching theoretical framework of this argument would be that I would say I'm drawing it from Naila Kabir's landmark work in 1999, where she says that empowerment, any sort of empowerment, here we are equating it into women's empowerment, should take in a way that resources are given. This is pretty much same as Amartya Sen's capability approach otherwise, that the resources should be given, which is a precondition to empowerment. And that resources should enable the recipient to have their own agency to act on what they want, not what is dictated, what they want. The process of exercising one's own agency. That leads to achievements or a paradigm shift for equality in this case. This should be, since we are talking about gender budget can be equated as resources for achievements. The gender budget should be able to enable agency of women targeted to become achievers. This is the overarching argument within which I am situating Moser, Vatliwala, and Kunyaman's arguments against Kerala model. So let's dive into the discussion. So the first, as I told you already, that the WCP impairment is the first issue of Kerala's gender budget also. Okay. WCP is undoubtedly a rudimentary form of gender budgeting. Nobody questions about it. And it has an inherent problem that it is not addressing gender needs, as Moser says, for example. It is a one size fit, 10% fit for all. Science and technology, you allocate 10%. Health, you allocate 10% for women. Education, you allocate 10% for women. Welfare, you allocate 10% for women. 10% is allocation for women, whatever happens, no matter. Is WCP, which is not gender sensitization at all. It's the first step. But, and in 2005-6, there's a clear demarcation of how a gender budgeting should be, indicating that there is a women-specific scheme, WSS or Part A, which is positive discrimination towards women, where beneficiaries are only women. This is kind of a reservation mechanism that we argue for an equity argument that there are historical inequalities, and those historical inequalities can only be addressed by positive discrimination. So there is a Part A. Then there's a Part B, which is ideally proportional to women's representation. Let's say in a category, let's say health has 50% of or 60% of the population as men and 40% of the population as women in the targeted program. Then the division of that budgetary allocation should be 60-40. That is Part B. But for ease of practice in finances, we put it as, the structure was given as above 30% of allocation or 30 to 60% of allocation for women. Depends on size of population or the data that they are referring to, which are called as pro-women schemes. At least this is the basic skeleton of gender budget in India. But many states, including Kerala, continued WCP up until 2017. Okay, we argue it from 2005-6 that the policy exists and what has to be done is being told, and Kerala has taken this policy in its true spirit or in its true structure by 2017. Even today, Kerala's gender budget is actually not Kerala's gender budget. I have written about this in Madhrubhumi in Malayalam, saying that it is actually Kerala's plan budget or plan gender budget. A budget is by principle is both plan expenditure and non-plan expenditure. And plan expenditure alone is never budget. Or at least we should be openly saying that it is plan budget, not budget. So that study might tell you more details. So if you look, why the structure is problematic is because if you look at the structure that is given in Government of India, the union budget and Kerala, the positive discriminatory edge of the gender budgeting itself diluted in Kerala. In Kerala's Part A, women-specific schemes, it is 90% to 100% beneficiaries are women, not fully women, not 100% women. There is no explanation towards this adjustment, structural adjustment. Does that mean that we have no area where 100% women beneficiary is there, at least in maternity, at least in healthcare, or some of the aspects which are possible, or some of the segments of society where it is extremely vulnerable? So this is a number game that this 90% will come towards the conclusion, where I'll give you an example how this 90% adjustment is making the budget more attractive in terms of number. And Part B is given as any schemes below 90%. It can be as meager as 1% also. Anything that falls to Part B, if not 90% or above. In India, it is more precise that either you have 100% beneficiary schemes for women, which is Part A, or just above 30. Anything more than 30 is okay. Up until 99% fund allocation for women can be Part B. Another, let's say, better version of the budgetary allocation in that way, a structural adjustment is always good. We can customize it, but in a better way. Look at Karnataka's, for example, on a comparative note that they have 100% Part A, the Part B, 30 to 99 as such, and they also have added a Part C, which is very practical, and there is an explanation towards it. It is anything below 30%, which cannot be or not necessarily be traced. There are, of course, India is known for its lacunae of gender disaggregated data, and we cannot explicitly split everything in terms of gender because we do not have data for that, sex or gender disaggregated data. So there are allocations which we make on assumption that 10% of it might benefit women. Such allocation can be their own Part C. And the best part is that they are not including that Part C in their total volume of gender budget also, though it is both planned and unplanned that they have Part C. So putting this in front, Kerala's, let's say, adoration towards WCP is somehow problematic. Maybe it is because that Kerala was very kind of sure that they have to continue with 5-year plans, though the center is not continuing with it. Planning board is taking all these iterations of the program, though It is not at the center, so it has to show up. It's okay. It has been going, but that does not have been, let's say, limiting gender budgeting to be a planned gender budgeting only. Now, the accountability, Kayo, comes as like even in bigger versions, as this is an extract from Gender Budgeting Handbook 2015 by Government of India, where it states these informations are gathered from the concerned state governments, where it states that Kerala is gender budgeting from 2008-9. And every study or scholar who have concentrated on Kerala's gender budgeting policy, you can check it again, have given Kerala an advantage of gender budgeting state from 2008-9, or at least from 2010, when it is actually happening from 2017, which is like around 10 years, a decade long gap between when the policy is declared and executed. The policy was declared during one government time, and they couldn't launch it somehow. And the government change happened, and they couldn't continue it. And then the new government assumed, and the policy was executed. So that long period was never addressed in either through government mechanisms or government reports or something, or through scholars who have studied on this in Kerala. So it's not only with Kerala. I am concentrating on Kerala, that there are many states that have done that. And some of the states which are again kind of like okay or could be considered as a better version could be Karnataka or Uttarakhand, that there is an proclamation in this year, then the execution in the next year, and there is accountability, that there is a specific gender budget statement. Again, studies in terms of accountability indicate that, like Srilada Bhatliwala's argument, that first giving a niche, a space, is the first step towards gender equal distribution of finances. So gender budget statements could be the minimum that we can ask for. And gender budget statement in Kerala is available from 2017 only. So you see the accountability Kayo beside the plan Kayo that we have. Now, this is what Bhatliwala's argument, which I have already given you, that the time and space in terms of accountability here, the gender budget statement is not there. So then we are not talking about gender mainstreaming at all for the 10 or 9 years that has been missed from 2008 to 2017. WCP is not mainstreaming, but studies or documents or agencies, government, whoever concerned, has been telling that we are gender budgeting. Now, this is not even repeated, but celebrated in the mainstream. This is even problematic, that there is always a fabrication, a very good one fabrication, that Kerala is good at social development indicators. No offense again, that sustainable development, human development, or even GDI, Kerala ranks #1. There is a relatively better position in Kerala, no question about that. But that doesn't validate that everything that we do is #1. When there are at least other models which are far better. So Kerala's claims in the recent years, newspapers or articles related to newspapers which are citing budget explanations or budget speeches, cite that giving a wow, Kerala is allocating nearly 21% of the budget as gender budget. Kerala is paying paying its due for women, which was not there before. Every mainstream media that you take from the Hindu to Madhubhumi will say this claim outrightly. And when we equate the 21% into the total budget as a proportion, it is a meager 3% rounded. While Karnataka, on a comparison, gives roughly 80% of their total budget as gender budget, which is actually what Kerala claims, but it is not having. Karnataka's 18% is excluding their part C, not including. If it is included, it is far, far high. Secondly, Kerala's annual growth of the average growth of the gender budget allocations. Let us be precise to budgetary allocations that are in plan only, plan allocation itself, were better in the initial years compared to the current years. In the years 17, 18, 18, 19, 19, 20, it was close by 3% annual growth for gender budget plan allocations, which have reduced to more than half of it in the recent years, which nobody or no media, no reports talks about. Which is another kind of celebration amid the chaos that is already existing. So what it indicates, let's say theoretically as a policy, is that Kunyaman's famous saying that it is phantasmagoria of Kerala model that always wanted to be a model or an exemplar in the mainstream. That it pushes that the development is happening, the avenue of development is happening. It always get the accolades of the rank or number by keeping the subject concerned at the lower scale, meaning that the beneficiary is always the beneficiary. There is nothing actually changing for the beneficiary to come up as empowered. Kunyaman is talking about this aspect of Kerala model again as a criticism against Kerala's plan development regarding tribal subplan or SC/ST component subplan. I'm not sure about that. It's tribal subplan, I'm pretty sure. So it actually happening time and again because there is lack of critiques, lack of questioning in Kerala, especially when it comes to social development, because people generally hesitate to talk against Kerala because that is the best in India. How could somebody talk against Kerala in terms of social development when it is actually number one in Kerala? There is a dilemma among scholars, I guess. And there are doctoral theses even from Kerala that says that all this, the data that I have shown you, is the other way around. It is correct that the Kerala is starting gender budgeting from then and there and so on and so forth. So this is why this is happening is because that there is a beneficiary continued at the end so that the government can repeat the process or the policymakers can repeat the process. And Kunyaman says that it is actually exclusion from empowerment and inclusion of welfare. This is where I'm saying that that is feminization of welfare. Welfare is happening. People getting benefit is happening, but that benefit is not strategic. It will not keep women to transcend themselves to the other stage of agency or empowerment. It might get you some money, it might get you some positions, but which are very patriarchal, stereotypical, practical, or that is up to the expectations of a patriarchal society or family. That is what happening with Kerala's gender budgeting model also so far. Adding to the number game, that if you look at the gender budget allocations, if you're interested in terms of GSTP, State Domestic Product of Kerala, which is a popular mechanism that we see that education allocation should be this much of the total allocation or total GSTP. Kerala's gender budget put together everything is less than 0.5% of the total budget. I mean, total GST. Nothing to see. Now look at the trend that has been growing in terms of Part A, B, and total. Total is what we have already explained that the growth is abysmal as it progresses. Look at the blue and orange icons. Blue icon indicates that it is Part A allocation, women specific allocation. Orange icons indicates that it is Part B, pro-women specific allocations. Ideally, in a society where it is patriarchal or gender unequal, it should be more concentrating on Part A, because there is a proven knowledge that society is asymmetric. So we need to do something positively discriminating towards the discriminated segment, which are women here. Okay, I forgot to say that in gender budgeting, we are talking about the dichotomy of gender. We are not so very inclusive yet about the other genders because we are just budding with the finances. So it's only men and women so forth. So Part A should have been higher ideally. It's not. Let's say it's okay. And Part A is actually standard. It's not growing. It's actually standard growth compared to Part B, which is again, Part A needs specific kind of like, data or requirement finding or policy analysis to see that there is a lacuna that can be pitched and addressed, that it is completely women specific, so that we have to put some niche over there and we'll have probably to continue with the policy forever. Whereas Part B are more of like revenue expenditure, recurring, or it can be timely, that this year we are putting this policy of scholarship, that year we are putting this let's say she taxi policy, next year you have like a women friendly road policy. So discontinuous policies or which are revenue expenditure are more in Part B because it's easy to appropriate, whereas Part A or women specific schemes are kind of a laborious work to put together all of its effort towards women, saying why. So it is stunted. It is iterations of the same policies again and again that existed. Those policies are also problematic. We'll come to that towards the end. Now, if you look at inside the party A and B, now the previous was party A and B in macro. If you go inside of it, which are this is dendrogram indicating that how they are ranked in terms of their contribution to total gender budget allocation. So if you see dendrogram for party A, you see all the top departments that have contributed to gender budgeting are the traditional women-oriented departments: rural development, social security, welfare of minority, that and this, and labor, welfare, agriculture. So the first 5, 6, 7 that I mean, do not think that all the 25 or 26 are actually giving equal or nearby equal kind of contribution to gender budgeting. No, it's more about the first 5, 6, 7 up to 10 maximum departments that contribute anything which are like markable. Everything else is like very nominal. It's namesake allocations that they put. And the dendrogram is created by averaging the contributions of these departments across these years from 2017 to 14 put together, taking the average is the ranking strategy over here. The same trend repeats if you look at part B also. It is nothing but different. Some of the positions are changed, but the major 5, 6 departments, if you see, are the same gender stereotypical or otherwise gender concentrated departments only. If you put it in total aspect also, the departments are pretty same, but again, the position somehow changes, but rural development never changes, welfare never changes. Across all the dendrograms, you see it's 1 or 2 or 3. Again, there is a reason behind it. And we are coming to that let's say I'm trying to conclude up with the inputs that we have already discussed, that the situation clearly indicates that there is a patriarchal obsession towards the practical gender needs while ignoring strategic gender needs. I'll tell you why. This is what Moser says that this can happen, and this has happened. The flagship policies that are there in Kerala's gender budget, like Kudumbashri, Manrega, Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Guarantee Scheme, NLRM, NULM, ICDS, etc., are the huge contributors to Kerala's gender budget. Kudumbashri is primarily a poverty alleviation program, not an empowerment program. Manrega is assuring the basic minimum wage for people. Whoever, not considering gender, whoever enrolled for it for 100 years. None of this ICDS is like contradictory. That ICDS is actually the one that should more concentrate on children. There is a separate child budget also. Despite that, ICDS is in part A allocation of gender budget. Manrega, I told you, why Kerala has altered part A from 100% to 90%. Manrega situate in part A in Kerala's gender budget, ironically, indicating that 90% of by number, it should say that 90% of the Manrega enrollers are from women. Only 10% or less than 10% are men. Could be a scenario. I'm not saying no. But if that is a situation, that actually again indicating that our society is very unequal, because Kerala's wage rate generally is so huge compared to Manrega's wage rate. So if women are concentrated on Manrega, that itself is a problem, that it's concentrating, or it's sort of a pink collar job concentration, which is a policy problem that has to be addressed, not altering the policy to incorporate Manrega into part A to say that our budget is so huge when it comes to WSS. Same goes with ICDS and NULM or NLRM or anything that is related to that. Now, Kudumbashri is otherwise existing policy in Kerala, which has established almost all of its achievements that are possible in Kerala. Kudumbashri, in my opinion, need not to have a support from gender budgeting. It can be a part of gender budgeting, but Kudumbashri is extensively criticized by scholars. For example, by Professor J. Devika from Center for Development Studies, that it is successful in Kerala, and it is attaining huge momentum in Kerala because it is very much patriarchal. It meets the expectation of a patriarchal society that women's mobility is restricted. Kudumbashri stems from neighborhood groups, self-help groups, which spans over neighborhood, which are socially acceptable, which need not to do anything on a high scale as an industry, which need not to have you an extensive traveling, which is not taking you anywhere as a unicorn startup or something of that sort, which need not to ask you like say technologically improve or have higher education or anything of that sort. Rather, it says that like be kitchen centric, be cooking centric, be domestic centric. Why can't we have this food or that kind of pickle or this kind? I am aware that there are policies which are breaking the stereotype, but they are very minuscule. If you take the larger chunk of Kudumbashri, it is largely stereotypical, largely patriarchal. Domesticating people involved in that, somebody can argue that it is a choice, but it is still not empowering. It cannot be called as totally empowered. Another problem with Kerala's policy is that there are regressive, problematic allocations like marriage assistance, especially for for people that are intersectionally downtrodden, like SC/ST components, which were exactly Kunyaman pitch in Kerala's exemplar model, which is pathetic. That a downtrodden segment of the society and a girl or woman from that particular segment should be given more resources to scale up their social status, not marital status. Sadly, under this component, you could see that education allocations is like 1/8 or 1/10 of the marital assistance that they get under the particular component. One way marital assistance cannot be put in as a progressive society supporting mechanism. Secondly, it can never be, let's say, overrated over education or anything of that sort, which could probably give in future, in the long run, avenue for them to scale up. Problematic. There are that sort of policy. Then there is a very clear absence of long-term vision about the policy that nobody knows where are we heading to. As I told you that as a part of the study, I have been discussing this with people who are in the policy spectrum, who are in the government mechanism, who are in the, let's say, scholarly aspects or activism aspects of the gender mainstreaming or gender equality in the society. And nobody knows like, what gender budgeting is doing in Kerala. Everyone knows that government is allocating so much of money, and everyone knows for a matter that there is Kudumbashri, there is Gender Park, for example, in Kozhikode. And these are probably something that might help gender empowerment or women's empowerment in Kerala. But let's say taking consideration of Gender Park, which has huge potential in terms of its association with UN Women and all, to address the data paucity issue in Kerala. Because if India's data paucity issue can be addressed, that can be easily addressed in Kerala because we are the largely literate, largely educated state compared to all other states in India. So if such an agency is ready and such a huge investment that has happened institutionally called Gender Park, and they themselves have no clue. Sorry to say that, like, what is our next step? Why are we existing? It's like it exists. It exists, but there is no agenda. There was this agenda. We are thinking about so this, and there are institutions. Say, for example, in I'm coming to that. I think I'll slightly run out of time. I'm coming to that. There are institutions in other states that have actually handholder for gender budgeting policy so that they could produce beautiful gender budgeting policies by doing course correction. That sort of arrangement has never happened in Kerala. Say we have Kerala Institute of Local Administration, we have Gulati for Finance and Taxation, we have CDS, we have Center for Budget Studies in QSAT, we have now Gender Park in Kozhikode. Everything exists, but there is no anchoring of where or how or who will take care of the long-term policy, despite the government changes in the state. So the policy is largely now vested with the planning board, and which is very mechanical. That they have different departments, and it's a regular budgetary process that the Kerala government follow. This is being adapted from a study of Mridul Epan, and then later I worked with Mridul Epan in 2020. So the process is mapped from there. So it is like call for financial departments budget circular comes and departments will propose the budgets and it becomes gender budgets. people say that there will be follow-up meetings or consultations, and which is very rare. But gender budgets, be it in Kerala or in it at any other state, it's usually done in a way that the department people will refer to the past year's gender budget and kind of reappropriate the figures and policies again for this year, and that's how it is done. Because there is no gender sensitization for the stakeholders has happened, and there is a lacuna of it. And planning board is not there exclusively for gender budgeting. They have n other priority areas to concentrate on, so they cannot single-handedly do it. Understanding this issue, again, Government of India has already given a beautiful model that NIPFP, National Institute of Public Finance and Policy, act as a consultant stakeholder for gender budgeting policy in India, along with the finance minister. And those exist since Government of India's gender budget exists. And there are states like Karnataka that replicated it. They kind of instituted Fiscal Policy Institute, which kind of a replica of Gulati Institute in Bangalore, as a policy stakeholder for that. And they are keeping the policy tight, folded in the process that there is a validation, there is a workshop, there is a stakeholder training, or like stakeholder awareness creation, stakeholder training, stakeholder discussions. So basically, there is an interim institution, interim stakeholder that tell this financial instrument that how it has to be gendered, instead of looking at the old document and put some number and propose it, or some other way that the government have some agenda and they put it in terms of gender or women and they allocate money. So despite existing such good models or given models, we still keep beating around bush is what my argument is at the end, and I'm concluding. Thank you. I'm happy to take any questions.
Hello, Kiran.
Yes, Dr. Nancy.
Could I just say a few things because I'm traveling, I may have to leave.
Sure.
Yeah, okay. Hello, Ashraf. And
Yes, ma'am.
let me see if I can. Not very good, the video for a minute. Okay. Thank you. I think this topic is very important. But I think your presentation has been very one-sided. And therefore, I think not rigorous academic work, if I can say so. So two things. One is just an example of that. See, all programs have problems, and it's good to be critical and appraise them. But Kudumbashree, for example, you cited one critic, Jay Devi. A lot of other scholars, including people outside Kerala and not on the left. Okay. So like Bina Agarwal, have looked at the things and said it's a success in some respect, not in 100%, and particularly in women's empowerment. And a good proportion of these women have then stood for panchayat elections. That has further empowered them. So I think that the literature you cited in this way for every slide was just what you liked. You've just picked it without any evidence. And I think this is very serious. That's why I'm pointing it out. You've done a lot of reading and a lot of work. So I'm not putting that down, but I'm saying what you presented today. Second thing is that I don't know what is the share of the Kerala budget in GSDP. Can you tell me that? What
it's
is the share?
percentage.
Huh?
0.5%.
No. Share of the entire Kerala budget in Kerala GSDP.
I think about 16%.
16. Okay. So this is half out of that 16, not out of, because GSDP is very high. We normally don't take that. So anyway, point is this, that I think your exercise is very mechanical, if I can say so. How much is given for this, that, and the other. And I don't know, I live in Karnataka. If you've been to other states and you see women's empowerment situation, you won't think that the budgeting may be very good. The process may be very good, but what is the outcome? So let me give one example here. I think it's not just, it is important, allocation should go up, I agree with you, but unless you combine it with what are the specific kinds of schemes or programs or policies that Kerala has done. And I think that's where it's been innovative. And just to give you an example, because this came up about a few weeks or 10 days ago, Kerala has a scheme for women directors. And Payal Kapadia mentioned this in Cannes, that Kerala government is support. So you talked about empowerment, not just in the usual health education, but innovative new schemes. Maybe the initial allocation is small, but that I don't know. I don't know about the allocations to all these things. But I think there've been some very innovative programs within the gender budget. So ultimately, I think we have to look at the allocation, but we have to combine it with the what is actually being done. Now, because of various fiscal issues, I think again, people in GIFT can correct me. The share of the planned budget perhaps as total budget has gone down. I think, I'm not sure. So I think everything is to be kept in perspective. You just take an absolute number and say it's 0.2 of GSDP or whatever, 0.5, without knowing what is the context of what is happening to the Kerala economy. Now, the non-plan, which you said, what non-plan must be having some, how does one, again, this is, I think people in GIFT will be, plan budget, it's very easy to see where are the allocations going. But non-plan, one has to PRC. One has to see what and where in non-plan might there be allocations for different gender, transgender as well. I think Kerala is the first state to have transgender policy. You didn't mention that, has various schemes for transgender. So I think, as you say, it's gender, it's not just women. So transgender is also something that perhaps you could have looked at. So I think, Ashraf, it is little, it's very easy to just come up with, patriarchy and what is Caroline Moses said. Last point I'll make, I don't want to go on. I think you just have to think about your presentation a little bit. I'm sure you have more evidence and more readings too. I think ultimately it's very important. A government cannot empower people directly. That empowerment requires mobilization. Empowerment requires something else. So there is no country in the world where just through the budget allocations, women get empowered. Okay. So you could have, so I think we can't judge something by what it's not supposed to be. A budget is supposed to provide, say, a hostel for a working woman. A budget is not necessarily, budget cannot do everything to empower women, to change patriarchy. I agree, there are other bigger issues, but I think, is budget the lens? Then we are criticizing a cat for not being a dog. So please think about it. And particularly, I think referencing, you still hold these views, but please give the other views and please counter them with evidence, with facts, with data, then it's plausible. Thank you very much.
Ma'am, should I respond to each of these things separately?
Dr. Ashraf, could I ask Dr. Niyati to reflect?
Yeah, please.
Then she will open the floor for discussion.
Yes, please. But I'm planning to conclude towards the end. I think it will be nice that we are having a question answer session and we can floor the open for discussion. And towards the end, I'll conclude.
Sure. So what I'll do for your convenience, I'll try to moderate the offline questions here in the boardroom. And
Sure.
if there are questions online, we'll first give preference to people online, if there are any specific questions. Otherwise, we'll collect questions from here.
Okay.
Okay, any questions here?
Hello, Ashraf. I've got clarification from a layman's perspective. For example, now if you're looking at the local bodies grants being given by the government, maybe if you can come up with at least some suggestions with regard to the projects that need to be taken up, according to your argument, what would it be?
That's a really big question. if I have to suggest a policy, I think at the local self-government level, it would be easy to gather data because we will be only dealing with a finite number of people on whom the budget is prepared or the expenses are being made. And given our, let's say, advancement in technology, it's not an easy, I mean, it's not a tough task. So I think, I mean, that's where I am placing the criticism even against the gender part, which is, in my understanding, instituted towards addressing all these issues, and the work is not being started. So creation of a, say for example, sir, as ma'am already added as in her comment that like, we cannot definitely criticize Kerala for or Kudumbashri for or like, budget for equality or inequality. So we need to have clarity, certainty to back or not to back any policy. So any budget that should take, meaning be it at the local self-government level or even at the state budget level, building up a data which actually justification for all of these allocations would be the first step. At the local level, it would be easy. That's what I feel like.
We have a couple of more questions here. We'll take them and we'll see if there are any questions online. Yeah, please, Vipasha.
Um, Hello, I hope I'm audible.
Yes.
So, thank you for your presentation, Dr. Ashraf. So first, I'm gonna ask a question from my fellow PhD scholar, Jobin George. So he's asking, do you think gender budgeting effectively addresses the needs of diverse gender identities, or should it be improved to do so? Do you want me to collect all the questions and then probably you can answer? So I'll just ask my question next. Okay. So I just thought I agree with the points Mathura ma'am had mentioned, especially about the Kudumbashri point. And what I feel is it has to like the change to, from patriarchy to a more gender balanced or equitable society has to start from the grassroots level, or like, the basic interaction between humans, which cannot be, again, directly done by just allocation of, funds for different policies. Those are just, what do you say, like you had mentioned, the capability approach. They're just a means to sort of enhance the capability that is being built. But to build that, I think change has to come, from a different source. And okay. And the next thing is, you had mentioned you were very much in support of the validation workshop you had mentioned regarding the model in the end. So I was just thinking, what has actually, have you seen the outcome to sort of very strongly support that sort of gender budget model? Like, what were your observations? The next bit would be, you had mentioned about the reasons for delay in, I don't know if you've mentioned the reasons, but you mentioned about the delay in accountability. Did you look into that? So would you share your observations on that? Also, there was another point about gender neutrality again. I think that you could combine it with the whole Kudumbashri idea. Some policies need to be gender neutral to sort of target, certain aspects. Like, for example, MG and REGA, although you did claim it to be patriarchal, but they are a source of, jobs for women, which is, I think, a like first step towards empowerment, at least in a way. Something is better than nothing, I would say. And yeah, for now, that's all. Thank you.
Okay. Shall I go on or are there more?
Yes, you can respond to this round of questions, then we'll have more questions.
Okay. I think first of all, even through Madhuri ma'am and for you, I think knowing my kind of like bio would be more convincing that I'm from Kerala. I'm not from Andhra Pradesh. I'm working in Andhra Pradesh. I have lived in Bangalore. I have attended the validation workshops in FPI Bangalore. I did my PhD thesis on Karnataka's gender budget. And am I audible and clear? Is there any issue?
Yes, yes, you're clear.
Yeah. So I have also have heard or like experienced the sheer criticism against me when I talk about Kerala. Okay. So first, that this gender budgeting addressing all the issues or all the gender? No. The answer is certainly no. That, as I already told you in the beginning of the presentation, that in gender budget we only or still mean that gender is dichotomous, that there are men and women. Transgender allocation is a new addition by Kerala government now. Good attempt. I'm not saying no again. I think I keep saying all these things. I'm saying Kudumbashri is good. I have no offense, but it has to be seen in this way. So just transgender budget is there, and there is allocation also, and we are trying to do something good, which is a model, and all of these things are ready. But if some of you ask again, on what basis? Do we have a transgender community data, their needs, their economic resources, and are they getting welfare or empowerment, anything of this out of this? I'm not saying check it tomorrow. No, over years. I am criticizing these policies by putting them in over years, like 15 years, 10 years of gender budgeting in Kerala, not by yesterday. So that's why I'm precisely not commenting anything on transgender budget because it is a new thing. That it's just too new to comment. So transgender sort of budget or a budget that addresses all the gender should be the one ideal that addresses all the gender requirements. So the current one is a no, and it can be in future. But I don't think there are any models that have done this before. And Kudumbashri, regarding Kudumbashri, it does a lot of good things. And as ma'am added that several example works of Dina Agarwal or a lot of works from Kerala, scholars have endorsed and international scholars have endorsed that Kudumbashri is such a adorable model and self-help group and the sort of development through self-help group after Bangladesh, I think India has a lot of accolades in that way. But my argument over there was that strategically speaking, this might not be very favorable situation. It is good. It is giving some resources, it is giving some money, but it's also restricting something. So keep adoring them is problematic. I'm not saying they themselves are problematic or they didn't do anything in the past. No. It's something like as we progress as a modern society, we will have to leave certain things behind and adore new things. That way, is my criticism is. I'm sorry if it sounded it other way around. Regarding validation workshop in the other model that I presented, yes, I told you that as a part of my PhD research, I have been participating in the entire process of Karnataka's gender budgeting for months, around 6 months in Fiscal Policy Institute in person by living there, interacting with the different stakeholders. So I do. And I found it is very much workable and working and interesting because I also have worked in Kerala's planning board under Professor Mridul Eapen on gender budgeting of Kerala only. So I have seen, let's say, both the sides of processing, not extensively in Kerala, definitely. In Kerala, it was more like open on visiting because it was amid the COVID-19 pandemic. We couldn't make it all physical. But by that experience, I can say that it is. And delay or problem in accountability is there in across all the states in India or in the world or global countries that are doing gender budgeting. But I am situating Kerala in a peculiar situation that Kerala is the one that everyone look at as a model. So we can be a still better model, not by having the traditional thing again and again, or say problems and again and not addressing the problem. Now the argument is that somebody would think that like the problem is that you should not have to you should not have to criticize everything that is a left ideology. Say the criticism against Kudumbashri usually backlash like this, that it's just a left ideology, so you do not have to do. It has done its own merit, yes, it does. And you see, Costford, who is funding the study, is also a left institution who has funded the study. So that's how I think the kind of merit that the research should have, because we are not here to endorse anybody. That's why I'm saying this is a policy criticism, not per se the number also. I'm not even looking at the 0.5% or 1%. I was just giving you an example that how it should progress by that number, not per se saying that the number is small, and comparing it with other states to indicate that it is still possible to be better, not the other way around. And gender neutrality in certain policies can be assumed, but not in a policy like Manrega. Because Manrega is definitely a lower tier job compared to the normal coolie work in Kerala. The normal coolie work in Kerala will give you 3 times higher salary than the Manrega gave you. So putting every woman on Manrega, all the women on Manrega is definitely telling that you are somewhat less qualified to earn more and let the men earn the higher wages. That cannot be a policy saying it is gender empowering or like it is giving you some money in that terms. That is what my argument.
Thank you. We have another round of questions here, if you may.
Yeah, please.
Yeah, thank you.
Hi, sir. I think I am audible. Yeah. So first of all, I have to say that I'm little against about your approach regarding something, because it is mostly on an identity based approach you have taken here. And in my opinion, this budget allocation for gender budget allocation is kind of a representative one. For example, Draupadi Murmu being the president of India doesn't mean that women are safe in India. Like that kind of an thing about this gender budgeting, I must say. And your approach regarding patriarchy, and even in last talk also, the current mode of production doesn't make women and men to do work in equal wage. So this NREGA, the basic pay of NREGA is higher in Kerala than other states. That thus shows an what to say, a total upliftment of Kerala, right? And the men are going for a higher wage there, and women is what to say, women is in lower wage means that is the system, and that's how our society works. We cannot take that away from a single standpoint. That's what I have to make about your patriarchy thing and all. That's it.
Yeah, I totally agree that we cannot take patriarchy in one shot. I am saying that is true. I'll tell you an example. Say there is a study, I don't remember whose study it is, but it is from the West, okay, developed countries, English speaking, or Europe. And the study indicates that the what do you say, economics professors um, in different gender, men and women who are economics professors in established universities in Europe, and they were asked a question about what sort of economy that you kind of prefer, the one government intervening or the one that is laissez-faire, very free economy. So it was apparently very evidently the result was that most of the women economics faculty argued that there should be a government intervene supported sort of economy, and most of the men argued that there should be a free laissez-faire capitalist economy. This stems from our genealogy. We have nothing to do with it. What we have to do is there is a follow-up study with this, that in education sector, if you take that, where are men and women say concentrated in terms of, let's say, teaching. I teach and most of you will be teaching in future, or you're already teaching. If you look at the university teachers in terms of gender and nursery teacher or primary class teachers in gender, you see a lot of women concentrated on primary classes or nursery classes compared to university teaching, which does not mean that primary class is economically more benefiting or so. It is basically a patriarchal expectation. We cannot change it tomorrow also. I am repeating that. I am not saying that tomorrow after 5 years we have to change it. No. Practically, strategically, we have to put in policies thinking in a long term that how this inequality can be addressed slowly. Maybe after 50 years, the system should change. That vision should be there instead of supporting that our society is like this, we cannot change it like this. That is all is the argument. I'm not saying it is not good now, so that we let us break everything for tomorrow. No.
Dr. Niyati, there's a question online. I think somebody has raised hand. Yeah.
Akhila? Hi, Akhila. Do you have a question?
It's muted.
Akila, can you unmute yourself and
Yes,
hello?
sec-
Okay. Any questions here offline? You have any questions here?
Hello. I also have same line to ask. I mean, the approach issue raised by Madhura ma'am and Ratik. So here you have, like we have a number of program policies, and you are saying that policy approach is the problem. Number doesn't matter, but you have shown most of the slides, the numbers, right? The allocation is very poor. I mean, the so-called 11% is not the right and all these things, right? But can you, some of the cases, I mean, we have worked on some of the aspects. For one case, we have done a project on the welfare pensions. Okay, pension coverage of the, there are one particular unmarried woman below 50, above 50. There is one pension scheme exclusively for the female, and also the other major pensions. The allocation is there for the women. So that allocation, if you take, there is one that is one among the flagship program that Kerala government comparatively, if you take the 28 states case, if you take this one, so that allocation and its coverage and its coverage as in like the number of beneficiaries, and the budget is quite high compared to all Indian states. It is I think a slightly better portion. Even if you take the Karnataka case or Sandhya Suraksha Yojana, if you take a Sandhya Suraksha Yojana component of the gender allocation, the Kerala size is far bigger, right? So the policy approach may be different for different sections or different priorities. So can you generalize based on that with this approach issue?
Collect question from Akila as well, Dr. Ashraf.
Yeah.
Hi, Kiran. Am I audible now?
Yes.
Hello, Ashraf. Thank you for the wonderful presentation. I have two issues mainly to focus upon. One is regarding, I think you are more concentrated upon your example on Kudumbashri and the other employment generation schemes. That's why I think much of the discussion was focused on that. So when it comes to primary level, that is in the local governance level, when gender budgeting is initiated, I think the local governments, each panchayat have their own flexibility in deciding to which schemes they can allot the funds. So in that way, there are many panchayats in Kerala who had initiated many programs that address the strategic needs of the women. I think it's a part of your project is an ongoing project. I think it will be great if you can go into those projects and understand and get the critique of that. That I think that will help you in that, in making this one, rather than putting onto one side of criticism, that I think you can make more comprehensive approach on that. For example, I can point to the women-friendly schemes or women-friendly panchayats in Mararikulam South Panchayat, women-friendly panchayat scheme adopted in Mararikulam South Panchayat. And there are many other projects that were initiated during this period, that is from year 2017 to 2024 period of time, which focused on the strategic gender needs of the women. That also comes under the gender budgeting programs. Second is regarding your theory, that is Moses' conceptualization of gender needs. I think in your concluding session, you are just addressed about the practical. You just mentioned about the practical needs and strategic gender needs, but I think it could be more. It can be more critic when you can, if you can connect each, if you can take each each policy decision or each policy formulation of the government, whether it satisfies the practical and strategic gender needs. Such kind of approach, I think it can also give good critique rather than just focusing on the just one side of the story. Thank you.
Okay.
Ashraf, I have a connected question to Dr. Ranjit, so I'll, if you permit, I'll,
Yeah, please go on.
yeah. It's somewhat connected in the sense, you know, each state, if you look at it at the subnational level, each state, if you look at women's situation or how they are placed, it varies substantially, right? So if that is the context under which we are operating, then do you think there is a framework that states across the country can emulate and follow? Don't you think, each state should be cognizant of where they stand, what are the specific needs, and how we address them? Rather than having a one standard model, it is almost like, there's nothing like one size fits all. And also, in my view, there shouldn't be like there's a framework that every state or every country should follow. That is one. And I would like to pick your thoughts on, the most famous but recently celebrated Loki Banda scheme in West Bengal. How do you see it within the lenses of gender budgeting? And if you are allowing us, I think there's one last question from offline. And after that, we'll hand it over to Dr. Niyati.
I think.
Sir, it is just a clarificatory question because you have taken the specific schemes which has been allocated for gender, right? In general services, social services, and economic services, the allocation may be going to gender because if we take education in Kerala, in higher education sector, 75% of the students are women, girls. So it is actually the general expenditure which is going to the more going to this gender, specific gender, like. So that has also been decomposed, right? So
Exactly.
yeah.
Exactly. Yes, you're right. That's a problem too. We didn't mention that where it is more. It's not there. So okay. Regarding the pension policy scheme and regarding this particular 75% of the girls could be the beneficiary of a policy. These things again, see, one probable thing that I think like it's just a statutory declaration that my title itself was a critical appraisal of Kerala's gender budgeting policy, not like something which sees or review both merits and demerits. No, I was outrightly clear that it is going to be critical, and we have to pack everything in 1 hour. That you should understand my plight. So regarding the pension, the policy, subnational policy in India, again, I have let's say, a lot to explain on that end. And as finally, as Kiran sir added that it is definite that we do not have a one model fit everyone sort of a policy. That's why precisely didn't suggest, let's say, Government of India's policy to be replicated here. We are saying that there are models, we can kind of adapt them, not adopt, if we do not have anything better. And that is precisely the idea also, I think, that the union budget did not dictate anything on the state budgets to say that follow this model. That is, again, leading to WCP as a continuation or considered as another term of gender budgeting in India. Now, out of all this criticism that I made, my fundamental criticism that Kerala did WCP in the name of gender budgeting. Nobody talks about it. And the nuances of budget is not my forte for this discussion. So pension could be better in Kerala, as you said, I agree. This could be better in Kerala, as I agree. And regarding Akhila's point that the subnational, sub-state, like local government, in terms of local government gender budgeting, actually Kerala's models are better than any other states in India. There are studies from these sort of like bigger economists in India, and I know that. and I have read them through. But that is again not our discussion, because local self-government again get the funds through fiscal transfers. That they are not generating the fund. They do not have the autonomy or of a finance department to decide everything that they wish. Do you think that a government that is not a village government or a panchayat government that is not the same as the state government, and they are having two different ideas, will work together? It will not. The local self-government actually act as a puppet or a remote of the state government. By and large, whatever better model that you have in your hand, that can only be executed when the government is also supportive. So my point here is that the policy narration, and why concentration on Kudumbashri, NLRM or ICDs or Manrega, if you take a locations of, again, I didn't want to cite some number, but the number is coming in and again. If you take all of these, let's say these 4 or 5 flagship programs put together in terms of their allocation, they are more than half of the total gender budget. Every other policy that we say list, there are thousands of policies in Kerala gender budget, contribute only the remaining 40% or so. So if we put it in terms of number also, it's problematic, just because we have some, I mean, my argument is that we definitely have some niche of improvements. Some policies which are very adorable, good. But as you suggest me not to generalize, I also humbly suggest you not to generalize that we have merits or we only have merits. My argument is problems, not merits. Some other, I really wish that Gift get another talk on the, let's say, models or the creative aspects or replicable aspects of Kerala's gender budget. That is not my study. I guess I'm clear.
Yes, very much.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Now, may I ask Dr. Niyati to
Please.
reflection? And Dr. Niyati, may I also request you to read if there are any questions on the chat box?
No other questions in the chat box. I think it's only Akhila's question.
Okay.
So to conclude, Dr. Ashraf has provided a comprehensive view of gender budgeting in Kerala over a period of time, along with the gaps and challenges. I think what is troubling is that we are failing in the idea of gender responsiveness itself when it comes to planning gender budgeting. We have policies in place which is looking into the practical and strategic gender needs, but we have to also look into the critical perspectives of that as well, because there will always be this problematic question: why not address all the practical gender needs before addressing the strategic gender needs? It doesn't and cannot have to be in a linear manner. Both have to be addressed at the same time. I think that reproductive rights of women and alleviation of poverty are equally important. So, and also when we talk about the success of existing schemes, it is not that they are insulated from a critical approach, because only that opens room for improvement. When we talk about empowerment, we can say Asha workers and Anganwadi workers are empowered through their community work and involvement with people, but them being used as low-cost resources for community development also involve some kind of exploitation of their labor, exploitation of their time. Therefore, we need to look into all the aspects and levels of empowerment. Anyway, I would like to conclude this session by thanking Gift and Ashraf for the session and looking forward to more meaningful interactions in the future. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And we have a formal vote of thanks. I invite Dr. Ashwati to offer formal vote of thanks.
Very good evening to one and all. And out of the overwhelming responses and comments, whatever you have got, it is so evident that your topic as well as presentation has been so effective. So yeah, with the changing gender roles and the enhanced pursuit for higher education and labor market participation and all, the whole gender perspective is the gender dimensions of gender problem is changing. So with that, we require a calibrated and carefully devised public interventions and public policies, no doubt about it. So in that way, your choice of topic is actually very relevant, that whatever existing framework we have, that we need to be perceived from a very critical point of view. So I should say that you have enlightened us in a broader way, and then specifically with your, approach on transparency and accountability perspective, because which is quite new to me, at least personally. Because whatever we have read and heard about the gender budgeting is basically about the numbers and the actual versus realized and all those things. So the approach which you have taken, the theoretical approach which you have taken, people raised some concerns about it. And one more thing I should add, that Professor Madhura Swaminathan's remark, actually you are so privileged to have Professor Madhura Swaminathan hearing to your lecture, because you can revise your work accordingly. And then, with all the remarks, whatever you gained from the floor, it is actually going to help you in a bigger way. So thank you so much, Ashraf, for accepting our invitation and delivering such an effective lecture and thought-provoking one. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you all.
Yeah, and Dr. Niti R. Krishna, thank you so much for effectively chairing the session and finally encapsulating all the points, whatever he has discussed and whatever the floor has discussed. Thank you, Niti Krishna.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. On behalf of GIFT, I thank all the online participants and I thank all the offline participants and also the technical support team here. Also, my thanks are due to the seminar coordinator, Dr. Kiran Kumar. And thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Ashraf and Dr. Niyati. Thank you very much. We look forward to hearing from you very soon. And we continue to have this dialogue. Thank you once again. And have a great day, Dr. Niyati. And a great evening, Dr. Ashraf.